What's happening on America's elite college campuses is not a sign of national strength, but decay. Their ignorance is not a crisis. Young people have always done stupid things. But what is a crisis in this moment today is that Joe Biden is losing the election, like Ukraine is losing the war, like Israel is losing the war, and like the center is losing a political battle in America to a far-left extremism and a far-right extremism. The American people have to care enough about the country for the country to survive. And this is a moment where we are starting to see the cost. It is Friday, May the 3rd. This is the warning. There are 186 days to go until the presidential election. Time is moving quickly now. Events are building. There's one thing to understand about this presidential election, like all. We still are in a space where what this election will be decided on is largely events that have not yet occurred yet, but can be seen like land from the ocean out against the horizon. And what you see is right in front of you. What do you see on this May Day in America? Building chaos. There's an important quote about American politics that was apocryphally attributed to Sinclair Lewis. It was that when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross. It made sense. He was married to Dorothy Thompson, the first American journalist kicked out of Nazi Germany by Adolf Hitler, personally. Sinclair Lewis was the author of a novel about an American fascism. It posed the question, could it happen here? 80 years later, we're about to find out. What has always fueled fascism in countries that are utterly incompatible with ever being susceptible to a left-wing autocratic takeover like the United States and Germany is the fear of the left, the threat of a left. What does that look like? What is rocket fuel for Donald Trump? Let me show you Cornel West. I'll come back to the immorality, to the indecency, and to the deep anti-Semitism inherent in what he's saying in a minute. But listen to the tone, to the tenor, to the uncompromising extremism and radicalism.
Students are just cannon fodder for their reputation, who are highly talented, work very hard, but have hardly any voice. And when you don't have a voice and you move in a nonviolent way, and Brother Pierce, you should know the two first intifadas were nonviolent. They shot them down like dogs. That's why Hamas didn't appear until 1988, and you had the vicious occupation in 1948. If they had shot Martin Luther King Jr. down and Rosa Parks down and so forth, there's no doubt that Black folk would have responded. That's why we, the Black people, haven't created a Black version of the Ku Klux Klan, because we had leaders like Martin and leaders like Fannie Lou. You shoot them down like a dog, it's going to be a very different situation.
And let's listen to Cenk Uygur scream about the American media, as if he's not a part of it. The question he seems to be asking is, who controls the media? And later on, when somebody he disagrees with makes a point, even though it's mostly stupid, he responds not substantively, not dismissively, but with the allegation of a conspiracy. Who's paying you? Who controls the media? Could it be the same people, Cenk?
Piers, are you going to ignore the framing? You know you framed it this way. And Piers, you're not alone.
You were
and you're
booked,
not the
all
main
of you,
culprit.
just to be clear.
Hold on, Piers. Let me give you a little bit of credit.
Right, okay.
You are open
Just-
to the Palestinian position 20% of the time.
Just to be clear.
That's why I come back on this show.
Just to be
But
clear.
the American media is filled with racist against Muslims. American politicians are racist against Muslims, and they revel in it. Rivers of blood in Gaza. And the American politicians and the American media say, not enough, kill them more, Israel, kill them more.
Yeah, just
and
to be clear.
Anyone who objects to the wide slaughter of those people is called an anti-Semite.
Just to be clear.
The American media is sick.
In the end, this radicalism is bearing its fangs, and it's showing itself. And if you disagree with it, you're subjected to what Piers Morgan was subjected to. Let me show you a bit.
When you got massive children at universities and hospitals completely leveled, and you have something on your Twitter rather than make that part of the framing of the issue, then in fact you become an extension of propaganda. And that's why I call you a racist, because it means then that a Palestinian
how dare you? Honestly,
have the same value
I'm sorry.
as an Israeli life.
I'm sorry,
If
but
a
how dare you?
Palestinian life had the same value,
I'm
you
sorry,
wouldn't frame
Dr.
it in
West.
that way, my brother. You would not frame it in that way.
I'm sorry, but you how dare you call me a racist? What you don't
That's
know
right.
is, before I did this debate, I did a long interview with one of the IDF spokesmen in which I went after him about their planned invasion of Rafah because I think it would be a catastrophic mistake. So don't call me a
Biden believes
racist.
that
And don't
too.
assume
Biden
you
believes that too.
don't
You think
assume.
Biden believes the Palestinian life has the same value as Israeli life?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely not. They
Yes,
have
I
a
do.
more fiber in his
I
bone when it comes to Palestinian predicament.
I absolutely
You think,
believe
think that's an answer
Palestinian.
to me?
I believe Palestinian lives matter just as much as any other lives, and I've always said that. Always.
It's not manifest in your framing, brother. It's
Right.
not manifest
But
in your
don't
framing.
just
It's
use
an
the
abstract.
word. Don't throw around the word racist without any evidence to support
I don't.
the fact that I'm a
I wait
racist.
until I hear a lot of evidence, and I've been hearing the evidence, and I throw it around. It's not throwing around. It's a reality.
There's something that's not talked enough about in the American media. And it's this type of condescension that falls like Niagara Falls on the American people, deluging them in a condescension. When they assert an opinion, they're told they're racist, they're stupid, they're dumb, just like Piers Morgan was. And for so many of these people, when that happens, their reaction to it is Trump. I'll vote for Trump. And that's why it's so important to understand what it is that Joe Scarborough was trying to tell the MSNBC audience the other day.
They can tell you my family. I'm not saying the Vietnam War was a just war. It was not a just war. But I can tell you the riots on college campuses, the riots at the Chicago Convention in '68, all of those things moved my family from being Democrats their entire life to being Republicans. I remember I was young, and I remember my parents asking, what in the world is going on in this country? And of course, you know, they were raised in the Great Depression in rural Georgia. Kind of hard for them to hear rich kids on campus of Harvard or taking over campuses at Columbia. But if you're offended by this, please, I'm trying to help you. I don't want Donald Trump to get elected, all right?
There you go.
Trying to help you. If you're too stupid to figure that out, you change to another channel, because we're sorting through this as a country, and this is not helping. This is not helping the people of Gaza, and this is not helping those of us who want to fight fascism in America.
What we're seeing play out in real time now is an unraveling. And who does that unraveling benefit? Who does it accrue to as a benefit politically? It always benefits the person promising order out of chaos, even if at the core, that person is an agent of chaos himself, as Donald Trump is. The truth of the matter is that MAGA has talked about a snarling left for a very, very long time as a threat, but it wasn't. There is something else about these protests that must be said. Let me show you on a map. This is the United States of America. This is the state of Israel, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Jerusalem, separated by an ocean. Over and over again in a lot of the media, there is a laziness creeping in where these protesters on college campuses are described as Palestinian protesters. They are not. They are American college students attending the most elite universities in the world, costing, in the case of Columbia, $100,000 a year. They do not live in suffering and brutality. They do not live under threat of ballistic missile attack or cruise missile attack or suicide bombing. The most absurd scene of the entire week was Kafia Karen, a privileged Columbia student demanding meal plan service along with her revolutionary activities. We live in a surreal time, to say the least. But one thing that is real, that is true, and should be evaluated as such, is the extraordinary interview that took place between Time magazine and Donald Trump, where he laid out his plans for a second term. And those plans should be terrifying for every American who loves freedom, who loves liberty, because they are a blueprint for dictatorship. And I use those words precisely, directly, premeditatively, and purposefully. I was appearing on Scripps News the other night, and I was challenged appropriately. What do you mean? And I was clear. Let's watch.
What does that mean?
Well, we have a former president of the United States and the Republican nominee who's making a number of different pledges in that story. And let's back up. This story is the most important political news story of this 2024 election, and then some. Time magazine, in one dramatic magazine cover, has restored itself to what it once was. This is a shocking story. We have an American presidential nominee who was in the White House talking about the subjugation of American women who will have their pregnancies monitored. And if that could happen, birth control could be monitored. He's talking about the creation of a police state. It's time for the country to wake up. I was asked another question about what it was that I thought Donald Trump meant by he was opening to monitoring pregnant women.
Do you have any concept of what that means to monitor, to track pregnant women?
Well, at the most direct and simplest, it's a call to put government into the doctor's office with a pregnant woman and her family to monitor the status of the pregnancy, to make sure that the woman isn't doing anything to encourage a termination of the pregnancy. So in some measure, it's like a department of pre-crime from science fiction, where every pregnant woman will be suspected by their government of attempting maybe to terminate their pregnancy. So therefore, according to Trump, said woman will need to be monitored. I answered the question, but the truth of the matter is I could have answered it better. But the realities of live TV are, when you get a question that came out of left field, and for me, that one did, you react as best you can. I think I was mainly right, but I'm going to try to be a bit tighter than I was. Think about this. Monitoring pregnant women, but it will be left up to the states. So let's imagine that that is the case, that we allow for there to be the descending of an iron curtain down across America. On one side, women will be autonomous and free, and on the other, they will not. They will live in a state of subjugation and suspicion. Because what else could it possibly mean to monitor pregnant women other than this? When a woman becomes pregnant, she becomes suspicious. Because abortion, which was once legal, now being illegal, will be inaccessible to some percentage of women in that state who would have chosen in the old days to terminate their pregnancies. Because they cannot, though some might still choose to do so if they could, all women are now suspected of perhaps wanting to end their pregnancies. Some of those pregnancies will end naturally in a miscarriage. Now, the interest of the state becomes clear. All miscarriages are potential crime scenes that must be investigated, where the motive of the woman regarding her feelings about the pregnancy are suspect. Because again, all women once had a right that all women have lost, and all women having lost it means all women want it, and not being able to have it means thinking about what was lost and wishing they could. And so if an event transpires that ends in a result that would be the same, of course it must be a criminal act. Hillary Clinton, many years ago, said something that is of deep importance in this moment. And it is that human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. Donald Trump disdains women. He reviles them, he defames them, and he rapes them. Women are not safe from the MAGA movement, just like Jews are not safe from this left-wing extremism breaking out amongst Americans in an explosion of anti-Semitism that has not been seen in the United States since the late 1930s, when there were more than a few Bund members zig-zagling at swastika-laden George Washington banners in a sold-out Madison Square Garden. Donald Trump is making promises, and he's saying what he will do. These are threats aimed at reordering the American way of life, and profoundly so. Think about this. What do mass detention facilities and camps look like? Will one be in your neighborhood, your county, your state, your town? How big will the camps be? The initial plans for Auschwitz were 100,000. How big will these be? Trump says he wishes to deport 11 million people. What will the impact be on domestic air travel, rail travel, traffic? How will they be captured, caught, processed? What will the cost be? How much money will be set aside for informants? Will there be checkpoints? A cop on every block who's a National Guardsman, an American soldier with a M4 slung low, asking for papers? Tanks and Humvees everywhere? Tell me what that looks like. For some of us of a certain age, we're old enough to remember the debacle that played out with regard to the repatriation to Cuba of a young boy named Elian Gonzalez. It was a shit show of the highest conceivable dimensions. And this will play out. Children being ripped from mothers, wives from husbands. This will be, in its application, in the end, a policy of cruelty. And all policies that degenerate into acts of cruelty are by definition depraved. This is a promise of depravity, a loosening of evil that will change utterly the fabric and the character of American society. The iconic American experience and images hitting the open road and driving to wherever you want, whenever you want, across a vast sea of interconnected roads and highways, that soon, if you listen to Donald Trump, will be filled with the American military acting on his orders to be the nation's federal police. This must be rejected. This is a grave threat. And yes, this is dictatorship. When Donald Trump says he will lock up his political opponents, journalists, activists, opposition political party, what evidence is there to suggest that he's joking, that he doesn't mean it? Of course he means it. Do you not think this man, Nick Fuentes, means what he says? Let's listen.
There is an occult element at the high levels of society, and specifically among the Jews. So many of the people that are perpetrating the lies and the destruction on the country, they are evildoers. They are people that worship false gods. They are people that practice magic or rituals or whatever. And more than anything, those people need to be, when we take power, they need to be given the death penalty. Straight up. And I'm far more concerned about that than I am about even non-white people or mass migration. These people that are communing with demons and engaging in this sort of witchcraft and stuff, and these people that are suppressing the name Christ and suppressing Christianity, they must be absolutely annihilated when we take power. This is God's country. This is Jesus' country.
He's a Nazi. He dined with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. Elon Musk has given him his megaphone back. Trump will incite. People will listen. The messages will cross. And they will build a fire. And that fire will grow. And what Trump will say, and what the Nazi Nick Fuentes will say, is be afraid of the left. Be afraid of the radicals. We can protect you. And that lie, that bet that the German people made in 1932 turned out to be the worst and the deadliest and the costliest in all the annals of human history. If our politics disintegrates the center, if in fact it cannot hold, then things indeed will fall apart. What's happening on America's elite college campuses is not a sign of national strength, but decay. A virulence is loose that has unmoored this generation of Americans at some level from the most important lessons of the 20th century. Their ignorance is not a crisis. Young people have always done stupid things. But what is a crisis in this moment today is that Joe Biden is losing the election, like Ukraine is losing the war, like Israel is losing the war, and like the center is losing a political battle in America to a far left extremism and a far right extremism. When the truth of the matter is, Ilhan Omar and Marjorie Taylor Greene are the same people. Rashida Tlaib and Lauren Boebert are the same people. None of them are tolerant. All of them disdain the ideas and ideals of the country. Pluralism. The American people have to care enough about the country for the country to survive. And this is a moment where we are starting to see the cost, the accumulation of 9 years of Trump, of dysfunction after dysfunction added up. Trump didn't break the American political system. It was broken before we got Trump. That's how we got Trump. And 9 years later, it's so much worse. And now the great test comes, 186 days away. And the question for the American people is very, very simple. Will we allow the greatest idea in all of human history to be detonated from within? 10 years into the age of social media, in a frenzy of narcissistic stupidity, look at me ignorance. Or are we going to take the first steps forward into an era of national renewal through this mess, through the imperfections of Biden as a candidate? This is the question at hand. And the answer is going to shape the next 25 years of America and determine peace in the world. Nobody knows what is going to happen in November. The greatest drama since the American Civil War is underway in this country. And the question is this: will America hold? Or will Donald Trump do what he promised to do in Time magazine? Because if he does that, the gravest crisis in American history since Fort Sumter was fired on will be underway. I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.